in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode. My name is Ike. Let's go ahead and click that like button, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. We have some interesting economic news. We live in interesting economic times with the inflation number at a height that it has not been at for 4 decades. Yes, that's 40-year high on this inflation. Where are you feeling the pinch? What adjustments are you making? What does this say about the future? And how did we get here? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about all that today, including other things such as, how are other people coping with the economic and political crises of various kinds all over the world? For example, we hear about things going on in Sri Lanka and whatnot. But anyways, how's it going, Aitwa?
It is going good. I'm glad to be here today. It's a nice 81, 82 degrees in Fontana, and I'm doing good. How about you?
Not bad. So 81. Yeah, it's I'm out here in the Bay, and it's like I believe it's a 90-degree day today. So that's interesting that you guys are getting a nice reprieve from has there been like a little heat wave going on there before, or?
Yep, okay. and some wind, which is interesting because heat and wind, it's not a very favorable situation in this dry part of California, but we'll survive, I'm certain.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. We're gonna jump right into the topic, right, by laying the groundwork. Let's lay down the framework here. What are the numbers? Because you know what, at the end of Q1, which is some point in April, on this very show, right, we were talking about 8.5% inflation, right? We were talking about 8.5% inflation and what that means and what people are going to have to do about it and things of that nature. And here we are, okay, 9.1%. So are we at the peak? Are we going to go down from here? Or is inflation going to continue to rise up, right? That is something that comes to mind, right? Because there's where you're feeling the pinch right now, but there also, if someone says, you know what, this is just the half of it, then that will affect what one needs to do, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, especially when you, depending on the kind of life that you live, you notice just how
tonight ongoing financial frustrations are getting worse across the nation. New numbers out today.
Why can't I stop it? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that you look at grocery items, everything, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, in every situation there's obviously if something is getting hot, then we know that if the heat continues, it's only going to get hotter. So I'm asking myself, when is this going to end? So yeah, definitely some pretty interesting times.
So we're going to lay down some of the groundwork again by watching this video. Let me see what I think it was. I was going to give a shout out here to the news organization. All right. WXFMR or something like that. Whatever. Let's see.
Tonight, ongoing financial frustrations are only getting worse across the nation.
It's not on screen.
The numbers out today show prices on pretty much everything hit a 4-decade high in June. The cost of necessities way outpacing wage increases. And financial experts say some parts of the economy, including the housing market, may not have hit their peak yet. With the cost of just about everything going up, many people are struggling to make ends meet. WFXR's Amanda Lee has more on what's adding to the spike and how you can prepare your family for what lies ahead.
The report that came out this morning was a little disheartening. We expected the headline inflationary number to increase, which it did, but we thought that the core inflationary number would show some signs of softening.
About half of the increase is due to higher fuel and oil costs. Roanoke Investment Officer Hillary Sunderland says we're still not as close to a recession as it may seem due to a large job market.
When you have a strong job.
Okay, so a few things here have been laid out on the table. One of the things that was mentioned here is the gasoline cost, right? Because we're seeing 9.5% inflation, okay? That means if it was $100 last year, it's $110 this year. But for something such as gas, I don't know what the rate is, but it's probably closer to 60, 70%, whatever it may be, right?
Yes.
In terms of the low prices from last year or similar period 12 months prior. Now, where are you feeling the pinch of the inflation? Now, I know, okay, we heard last time that, you drive a Tesla, so you don't know about these gas prices people speak of.
I don't. I mean, my wife has a gas car, so
Gotcha.
I have to hear from her every fill up. But what that has led me to do is, when I know I'm not going anywhere, I just tell her, look, you could take my car instead. But where I'm feeling the pinch, I have 3 boys and they eat a lot. And my grocery bills has easily gone up. What may not seem like much, maybe I'll say over in 1 month, I'd see there's about a $60 to $70 difference because everything is, what used to be $8.99 is now $12.99, and it might not seem like much, but as you buy milk and toilet paper and there's some stuff, things like cereal, milk, eggs, bacon, certain things you could just see. I'm like, this used to be $8, and now it's $10.99. So I'm definitely seeing it in the grocery bill, and there was something else, and of course the gas bill because we still have gas. And the water bill. No one's talking about the water bill. The water crisis in California. So
water crisis in California.
Right. That our water bill has gone up.
Electricity bill still.
We have solar. Okay, cool. But if I were to answer that question during the summer, it tends to the use obviously goes up because we have the heat. But when you have 3 boys, they're running their TV and video game system that at different intervals of the day, they start consuming a lot more energy. But definitely my number one would be the grocery bill. That's gone up big time.
Got it. It was mentioned that the inflation is outpacing the wage increase, which by the way is always an interesting thing to point out, because people they work at a particular job and they may get like a 3% increase every year, right? And that looks like, after they do a performance review and it's like, here you go, 3%. And in reality, that doesn't, it really isn't anything, because obviously 3% is, a good year for inflation, right? In terms of, that's pretty low inflation. Right now, let's say we're at 9%. So what should your raise, what should your raise be in order to be catching up with this? Plus also, when it comes to inflation in the marketplace, your employer accounts for this by raising their prices, right? So it's not like your employer is like, oh well, I wish I could just catch you up with inflation and then give you a raise, but I can't do anything. But it's like, no, your prices are going up, right? Because you pass on the cost. Your costs are going up. Cost for fuel is going up, which affects everything, such as the groceries that you were mentioning, right? And the delivery of anything else. So your employer's costs are going up and passes it on to his or her clients. But generally speaking, they don't turn around and then hand you pass on that stuff to you, because that's not their job to do that anyways. But
if they, think about it, if they did that, then really it'll match, but at the same time everything's going to go up. It's a triple effect. There's always that domino effect, right?
Interesting. If you give people more money, which is part of perhaps the reason why we're here.
Pandemic.
You do end up with inflation, right? One thing that is interesting though is that towards the end of the video, again, as we were watching, towards the point where we stopped, I should say, they were talking about the unemployment numbers, which are
down.
still, unemployment is still very low, right? So
Right.
people are fully employed. Inflation is going through the roof. It has not got to the point where inflation has caused enough demand destruction that people are now having to lose their jobs, right? So
Right.
you're still going at some point, right? If inflation continues to go up, you're going to start cutting down on bacon or milk or whatever, and somebody at the bacon plant or the milk manufacturing place is going to lose their job, right? But right now, no one is losing their jobs. It seems
Yeah.
like the employment market is great. Inflation is still increasing. But anyways, let us continue. Shout out, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead and click the like button as you come in. If you have not subscribed to the channel, subscribe. Click the notification bell. What's up with Snuggles in the building? Little Rock in the building. Always appreciated. And we got the solo expat also.
House market like that makes a prolonged recession.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about the housing market, right? So,
Mhm.
because you're talking about feeling the pinch in certain places, but I believe you have some properties, right? So
I do.
So, how has that been looking in terms of inflation?
Well, you know what's interesting is I have on average every week since I put that property for rent in 2017, I believe it was 2017. That's 5 years ago. Yes, I have had one real estate agent contact me, and it picked up during the pandemic. You know, hi, my name is Bob. Would you like to sell your property? I can get your property sold. I'm like, well, there's someone living there. And I think the last time you were on the show, I talked about that. And even my tenant, you know, every so often I go visit, and he says that, yes, he has people knocking on the door saying they're interested in the house. And what's crazy about it is all of a sudden now they're calling me saying that you're going to have a hard time selling it because interest rates are very high. There's still demand for property, but the demand has gone down. The inventory is now, there are more houses on the market, less buyers, but because of that, what is it? Last time I checked, 6.something%. A lot of people are holding on and saying maybe we'll wait because they're scared we might go into a recession. So yeah. I've been very kind and kept my rent. The rent price is the same for the last 5 years. So I'm wondering how will that come off if I just said, look, man, I got to take up the rent because if I sell the house, I can make a lot more money. So I'm debating back and forth. But to answer your question, I still get people interested in telling me, hey, would you like to sell the house? I can still sell it for you with these crazy high interest rates.
So do you have an idea of a increase in the asking price, generally speaking, for the house? In terms
you mean the price of the house or the rent?
The price of the house.
I mean, the last property that sold in that neighborhood went about I believe it was around 640. And I only bought the house for 270, I believe it is.
Gotcha.
And a little over 200. So there's a good money to make there.
Gotcha. Good money to make there. And it's interesting because you mentioned the interest rate, right? Which has been going up because here's what the Fed is trying to do, okay? The Fed is trying to take down the inflation, which, by the way, which they caused, right? Or which, generally speaking, somehow they kind of somehow caused, okay? But now they're like, okay, we gotta slow things down. Everything, you guys are going too wild in the casino of the equities. Mainly is where they're trying to affect. They're trying to affect certain areas like the equity markets, which are down, right?
Right.
And they have increased rates. Basically, one of the ways in which the Fed affects the monetary flow. They've increased the rates. So this is what we're seeing downstream. We're seeing it downstream in terms of the mortgage rates, right? And it's interesting because I was a couple of years, like 2020, right? Everything's crashing, blah blah blah. Of making certain types of moves, and I wanted to purchase a property simply to rent out. Like this was going to be a rental property. I didn't want to live there.
Right.
It's a place called Manteca around here, in the San Joaquin Valley over here in Northern California. Right. I ended up not buying though, and interest rates back. I think you could get like, let's just say 3. Let's just say 3. 3% was like sure, easy. And the negotiations went pretty far. Like, looked at the property, talked to people, got the loan ready and everything, and then I decided not to. And I don't regret not because there's certain other things where I was like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do this right now. But now that the interest rates have gone up, I'm like, ooh, that's
yeah, it's
crazy.
I guess you're in the FOMO, right?
Exactly. I'm in the FOMO. However, I still prefer having the cash, if you will.
Right.
Because
and that's getting more common. Everyone's holding on to them dollars, right? Because dollars make sense.
In times of recession, okay, cash is king. Well,
yes.
Because basically, there's blood in the streets. Everything is going down. Everything is going down, meaning people are selling stuff, right? And people are selling stuff looking for cash, right? And that's why the dollar is so strong right now, because cash is king in times of downturn.
Recession.
And even though technically we're not in a recession, but that's just because of the technical definition. But downturn, let's say, when things are in like this, let's say, when things are like this, people want cash. People are uncertain. People pull their money out of Bitcoin, out of the stock market, out of equities and other kinds of investments, and they want to hold cash. And the dollar is king of cash, generally speaking. So that's why the dollar is very strong right now, which I believe the dollar is at parity with the pound, which is a rare thing to happen. Typically, the pound is usually above the dollar.
Right.
So all these things kind of have like a domino effect on each other. A lot of times they're cyclical, or in terms of it's like the kind of a circular thing, where the Fed starts inflation. Now they want to tamp down inflation by forcing the slowdown in the economy, probably increase the unemployment rate a little bit, right? So that things are forced to slow down, and then inflation hopefully will then go down, right? Yes. That is the general idea. But anyway, so much has been said so far. 9.1% inflation Q2 of this year, but still we're technically not in a recession because of the economy is doing rather well in other areas in terms of employment.
Right.
Okay, there is no negative, shall we say, growth. There are low growth numbers that need to follow each other 2 consecutive quarters for the technical definition of a recession, right? And that hasn't happened yet. So it's an interesting thing that is going on. But let us continue.
Environment, much less likely.
She says recession is still possible for next year, but we should be prepared for those high prices to stick around. Financial planner and father of 5, Maynard Keller, says budgeting and buying in bulk are things his family is doing.
One thing that we're doing is trying to consolidate trips. If we're going to be running errands, hey, I'm going to be going to the store. Do you need something?
He advises to try and fix household appliances or cars yourself before hiring someone else to do it.
There are many things you can fix yourself. It just takes more of your time. And time and money are really a trade-off.
When it comes to putting food on the table, Becky Sisson with the Roanoke Rescue Mission says many families are turning to food pantries, especially older citizens taking care of younger family members.
This is something that we'll probably see through the fall and maybe through the rest of 2022.
Anyone is welcome to use their pantries and donate.
Families are going to have to come closer and closer together to make sure that they can make that dollar stretch to feed their people.
Reporting in Roanoke, Amanda Lee, WFXR News.
Gotcha. Now, when it comes to cash flow, which is an important aspect of this whole thing, because we talked about cash before, which is something that you get and you keep and you hold, because as I heard somebody say, cash is optionality, meaning you can turn cash to whatever you want, right? And you don't know what it is that you want or where things are going or whatever you might need, blah, blah, blah. That's why you hold cash typically, right? So, however, there's the idea of cash flow, okay, which is something a little different, right? Which is about income. Let's just say, right, about income from investments, or for most people, what that means is a job, right? So the thing about it is, in times like this, if you have a good job, while I figure out what's going on here, I'll probably just refresh the whole page.
Yes, probably need to just close it out.
I need to close it out and reshare and all that crap. Okay, but if you have a good job, okay, maybe you can speak on this a little bit. People tend to, if you have a good job, it becomes even more and more important right now that you hold on to that, because that's a key aspect, because that's cash flow. That'll take you through the time of uncertainty.
Yes,
it's like, oh, people are getting cash because they're uncertain. But it's like, if you have this, okay, I have this cash flow, I have this income, guaranteed it's a good job, it will take you through the uncertain times, right? Because you're like, okay, I have this much demand, I have this much supply of money coming in, boom, that's getting me through. and I can still plan, right? I can
Right.
still make certain types of moves. So what are your thoughts with regards to, shall we say, the importance of, shall we call it, income security, job security in times like these, especially?
I think in times like these, it's more important than ever, because we know that companies want to continue making money. They want to retain their employees, and our commitment to our income sources should be at an all-time high. And of course, one can argue, yes, I got to spend more money doing, getting gas, but it's important to hold on to these. And that's one of the things. I'm a firm believer in multiple incomes and multiple revenue streams. Using our, we've talked about this on this channel before, starting a business where you don't have no assets. Maybe it's consulting, maybe it's video production, music production, where you're relying on skill, talent, etc., or acquired knowledge. But more importantly, keeping your job, securing your revenue streams is important. Keeping your cash is important. I remember you gave a story earlier about planning to make an investment. My wife and I wanted to do the same thing. We were looking at a couple of properties in Texas and in Kansas, and for some reason we just didn't. And now that you look at what's going on, I'm thinking maybe this is a good idea. We might have invested that property. That person over there maybe couldn't afford it, and here we go, stuck with a property that we're not living in, have to pay the rent. But yeah, definitely keeping maintaining your stream of income, and as I mentioned, having multiple revenue streams, is all for the better, and holding on to that cash. And like you say, the safest way to double it, you have to fold it sometimes, right? But
Indeed.
ideally, we got to keep that cash. You got to keep it coming.
Indeed. And these are cycles. I mean, these cycles are called cycles for a reason, in the sense that, they're expected to happen. There's a business cycle, and there are other types of cycles as well. There's a demographic cycle, which probably something happens where you're looking at 50-year time spans in terms of like, the baby boomers. There's a big generation of people born, and then it has its effects through the economy. And now the baby boomers are retiring, and it's going to have its effects on the economy. Those are demographic cycles.
That's a good one. They are retiring.
Yes, indeed. Which, by the way, is long overdue. We've never had presidents this old, never had CEOs this old. And we've never had a generation, by the way, millennials, let's take it. Well, Generation X too, are sufferers of the extended stay of the boomers, let's say. But the millennials are the first generation in the United States, United States, that for a long time now can expect to do less well than their parents. In other words, when it comes to home ownership, age of first home ownership, and all those kinds of things. And you're not surprised, are you? Right? I mean,
I'm not. I'm not.
Because we grew up with this stuff, and we saw it, and we complained about it. We were like, oh crap, everything is things are not as pensions, all that crap is all it's gone, right?
Especially when there is a rise of entrepreneurship, where I'm making enough money to take care of my bills and my little spot that I live or room that I rent. I'm a social media entrepreneur. So there is this renewed sense of wealth and a renewed sense of I've made it, that does not compare to what the baby boomers declared or defined as I've made it. So, I saw this coming, and here we are.
Okay, so let's talk about how we got here a little bit, okay? Because again, we're talking about 9.1% inflation, okay? And how we're going to adjust as a result of the pinch that we're feeling. And as a result of that, you want to look at several aspects. I like to call them drawers of money, right? You have your long-term drawer of money where perhaps you're saving for some kind of freedom down the line, right? Freedom could be retirement, or it could be just be quitting a job and doing something, whatever it is. Kind of that's that long-term money. Typically, you want that to be insulated. You can't be like, oh, a recession is happening, or there's inflation is going up, so I'm gonna affect that particular drawer of money. Then you don't have it sufficiently insulated. Then you've done something wrong somewhere else, right? You know what I mean? So if, for example, you're like, okay, I'm going to cut down on bacon and eating out and blah, 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 that drawer of money, yes, that's the drawer of money that is supposed to be adjustable in times like this. Or I'm not going to speculate as much in the market. I'm going to pull out of certain speculative assets and hold on to cash, the cash storage, which we talked about.
Right.
But these are layers or drawers, as I like to call it, of money. And some of them should not generally not be affected unless that in case of emergency, right?
Right.
Push here, whatever. That's that layer, and then there's several layers above that. But there's something about needing to keep more money, which I think they said as a result of in times of inflation, you need to then reevaluate how much of that secure emergency fund that you have. Why? Because of that income security thing that we mentioned. If you're guaranteed your income, that you no matter what, you're going to be getting this kind of income, it's a great place to be in times of uncertainty, because you can still have a life raft, if you will, to sit and plan, and discern and look.
Right.
You're not so distracted. However, if that rafter is not so sure, if your income stream is not so secure, then you definitely want to be looking at, well, let me gather cash, right?
Right.
Let me gather up that cash. Let me create this buffer. Who knows what's going to happen? But Richard Fain now is going to be of Richard Fain fame. Check out his YouTube channel. He's going to be telling us, just reminding us, because we already generally know, what exactly brought us here, because we saw the whole story. We sat in our houses during the pandemic and watched this whole inflation thing happen, the supply reduction happen, and all that kind of stuff. But let's check it out.
Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. If you're stopping by the channel for the first time, please consider subscribing to my channel. And while you're at it, smash that like button for me. I really would appreciate it. Also, hit that post notification bell for me so that you're notified every time I upload a new video.
Fair use.
Be careful down in the comment section of the videos, guys. A lot of spam, a lot of scammers. I will never ask you to contact me by WhatsApp or Telegram. I also do not take money from my subscribers to invest for them. So please be careful. Don't get yourself scammed. If you want 6 free stocks, Webull is going to give you 6 free stocks when you open up a new Webull brokerage account. Put at least 1 penny in that account. They're going to give you 6 free stocks valued all the way up to $12,600. So after the video, I want you guys to go down to the description box of the video. Click on that Webull link, open up your new account today, go get that free stock, go get that free money. Well, guys, inflation is 9.1% as of June 2022 numbers. And inflation is the highest it's been in over 4 decades.
Wow.
And in today's video, I'm going to share with you my opinion on why inflation is so high. Matter of fact, I think there are 3 reasons for it that I'm going to share with you. The first reason is the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic starting in March of 2020, we had a...
It's kind of funny that he says the first reason is the pandemic, and then I'm thinking like, yeah, all the other reasons too, or more or less,
are the pandemic. The reason why you're wet is because of the water.
Like, okay, pandemic, and then there was printing of money because of the pandemic. And then there was demand, all that because of the pandemic. Supply, because of the okay, cool. Well,
pretty robust economy. Unemployment was low at about 3.6%. Wages were going up. Everybody was making money. Things were great. And then we had to shut down the country in order to fight this pandemic. But when we shut down the country, that also required our companies that make our goods and services to shut down as well. And when we started reopening the country, demand for those goods and services went through the roof. And anytime you have high demand and low supply, prices go up, right? And that is the #1 reason why we have inflation today. See, what happened is when we started reopening the country, we also gave our citizens a lot of free money in the form of stimulus checks, right? Enhanced unemployment benefits.
PPP loans.
Right? Debt forbearance, where we didn't have to pay our monthly mortgage payment. We didn't have to pay our student loan payment. We also gave businesses money through SBA, through the PPP loans and other SBA loans. So there was a lot of free money flowing. And guess what people did with all of that free money? they started buying things. And that's where all of that demand came from. Unfortunately, the companies that make our goods and services could not ramp up production to keep up with that demand. The second cause is how.
So before we go on to the second cause, I think that this first cause here is worth stopping.
Yes,
and
I agree.
reflecting upon. I will start on and then you can pick any other aspect. I'm going to start on this supply side.
Yes.
If you've ever made anything before, you see there are issues with this, with the way in which we could possibly recover from the supply shutdown. Okay, when you shut down a facility that has been producing stuff, for a while, and this stuff requires a supply chain, okay, of vendors and suppliers of raw material and all these other things in order to happen. And also it requires a staff, right, whom are, let's say, a trained, well-oiled machine, all this stuff. This entire well-oiled machine, and then you stop it, you freeze it for a year, I don't know, 18 months, whatever, 2 years in certain instances. And then you just say, go back. Okay, look, even if you just look at the supply chain alone, right? You're like, okay, go back. Now, okay, cool. Now I just push a button and all of a sudden, all the things that I needed, all the raw materials that I needed from all the people that I needed it from, is just going to appear.
Nope.
And the staff is going to be the same staff, and the well-oiled machine is just going to continue. No. You might never catch up. Okay, because other things have changed. So many things have changed around you and downstream and upstream or whatever with regards to the market that you're in and what you're producing. Forget you and just your supply side. Also, there's the demand side. In other words,
right? Who's buying the stuff?
Exactly.
Who's asking
People,
for it?
we talk about inflation, but at the same time, we've also mentioned places like Target and Walmart having too much inventory. Okay, so on the one hand, we're saying prices are shooting through the roof, and this is because typically there's so much demand and not a lot of supply. Okay, but at the same time, we're saying it's a lot of supply, man. Oh yeah, it's because it's the wrong stuff.
Right.
It's not the right stuff anymore. So you can't just turn on the engine and just start making crap, right? When it's like, well, people don't, because of the 2 years of shutdown, you don't know what people want anymore.
Right.
And this kind of reminds us of the distributed network that a market is in which, whereby there is no command center that has all the information required. There is nobody that knows where all the resources should be allocated, what the prices of everything should be, where goods and services should be moved to, and so on and so forth, what the demand is going to be. All these things are distributed by individuals making decisions here and there, and so on and so forth. We get it. We all heard Adam Smith and all that kind of stuff. Okay, good. Right. But this reminds us of that, and that when you stop that engine, you can't just restart it and all of a sudden, like some kind of miraculous AI machine, it just knows what to do. So that's part of the I don't know what to make problem is reflected in the fact that these grocery stores or these other kinds of stores have overstock of certain items. Right. But on the other items, they don't, apparently the demand is going through the roof and they don't have enough supply, and hence the inflation, right? So I'm just looking at that side, that whole supply aspect. But I don't know, you could pick on any other aspect on the printing of money or or whatever else happened for this first reason why we're here.
Yeah, I think that the I think what you covered, a lot of it is the primary issue, in the fact that you talked about you just don't press a button on the machine. I mean, I dare anyone to turn off a computer or a skill set that you have and not use it for 6 months. There have been times I haven't played a song in a few months, and it takes me a second to remember it, let alone a factory. And another thing to keep in mind is, in factories there are things like skilled workers who, over time, maybe through the fear of the pandemic, through COVID, or retirement, or loss of staff and capital and things like that. There are other factors that the pandemic froze that drastically affected a company's ability to just turn on the button and how much should we produce? Where did we stop? Did we stop with, expecting the delivery of 50? We all know things like eggs. And I don't know if everyone can recall. There was a time it was about stocking paper towels, toilet paper, eggs, and hand sanitizers and cleaning stuff. So companies like Johnson & Johnson saw an increase in demand and probably did everything they could to meet the supply. I remember seeing a box of eggs on, I think it was Facebook, for $70, 60 or 70 eggs or something like that. I'm thinking, wow. So yeah, I think that's a big chunk of it. But I think as we look through the video, we can explore other parts of what's causing the inflation.
Indeed. And go ahead and click that like button. Share the stream, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead and share the stream. Share it on Facebook, on Instagram DMs, on YouTube. If you have a YouTube channel, share it in your community tab. Send it to your text. Send it in a text message to your buddies or whatever, your coworkers, whatever it may be. Let's join the conversation, ladies and gentlemen.
Housing prices. Keep in mind, the pandemic has something to do with housing prices as well. Because, like I said, anytime you have low supply of something and high demand, prices go up. And the same thing happened with residential.
Yeah, it's taking some time to buffer, but
Yeah,
as you said, the pandemic was the driver of everything, and he's making some good emphasis on that.
Yeah, and by the way, let me just end this poll, okay? And it would seem like people are on the pessimistic side. Well, I'm not surprised by that. Okay, I want you to comment on it. Okay, basically, we're asking whether people think this is the peak in terms of inflation, or people think that it's going to continue. And majority of people are saying, no, it's going to continue. It's going to continue to rise. About 87% of them are saying that of the 16 votes. What do you think about that?
That if I think that it's going to rise,
it's going to continue to rise, or if we're at the peak and it's going to fall from here.
I think it's going to rise, and that's because there's still some factors there. COVID is still out there. So there's still, we have a joke in our house that where my son's instructor, my 6-year-old instructor said, hey, starting March, I think it was March 13, was it this year or last year? Actually this year, we're no longer going to wear masks. And he walks up to me and says, Dad, COVID is leaving on Monday. And I said, what do you mean? My teacher said we don't have to wear a mask on Monday because COVID is going to go. So I think that's still something that's troubling people. There's still people that's holding on to money that may have come from the stimulus, because I think the economy needs that money. I had a friend that said, I'm holding on to my stimulus checks. And I said, well, it's meant to be spent. So I think the temperature is rising, and I think there's going to get to a point where then it'll eventually plateau. For now, I do think that look at what's going on in Russia. The fact that we don't have a gas oil deal with the Russians, thanks to President Biden. But of course, we know there's more to that. But ultimately, I think that there's still a lot of jobs out there. Anyone who's been to a coffee shop or a restaurant recently, everyone has help wanted. So maybe as the more people get into the workforce, when gas prices start to come down, I do see that maybe between now and this time next year, we should hit our plateau and come down. That's just my own perspective on it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, let us see here. Let us continue with this.
Prices go up, and the same thing happened with residential housing market. When the country shut down and the country reopened, new construction could not build houses fast enough, and that caused a problem. When you don't have enough housing inventory to accommodate the demand, prices go up. And that's what we're seeing right now, guys. Demand is starting to come down in the housing market because of what? Interest rates going through the roof, right? Also, demand is slowing down because of people thinking there's a recession coming, right? So those are the two things driving demand down. But why aren't prices coming down? Back to that inventory thing again. Prices are not going to come down until we get more inventory. We still have more than enough demand, but we still have a very low supply of housing. So that's keeping prices high. But those high prices affect inflation. And then the third reason is gas, right? Now, a lot of people think President Biden is completely the one responsible for the situation we're in our country with gasoline prices. And guys, I'm not going to get into that debate, but let me give you my opinion on what happened.
Smart choice.
So again, pre-pandemic, our gas production or oil production in the United States was very high. But when the pandemic hit, we had to shut down everything, including oil companies, oil production. All of that had to shut down as well. And then all of a sudden, we start opening things back up. Again, getting all that free money, people buying stuff, including new cars. We did not have enough supply. And that's the first part of the reason why gas is so high is because here in the United States, we still have not gotten oil production back up to our pre-pandemic numbers. And then the other side of that reason for gas prices is sort of on President Biden because of him making the decision not to import oil from Russia. And again, guys, this is
So I'm assuming this is part of the sanctions as a result of what Russia did and is doing in Ukraine, right?
Yep.
So what do you think about that? Okay, because I think that to throw shade on, it's easy to say that okay, well, it's not a question of easy or not. It is the fact that if you're not gonna get the oil from there, you're gonna be hurting, right?
Right.
And Europe is facing the music with regards to this because a lot of European countries, they don't have their own production of petroleum to ramp up or ramp down, all right, or whatever, right? They are heavily dependent on Russia, and you have the whole kumbaya, let's all go against Putin and let's give him sanctions, right? So is it easy to say no? I'm still gonna get oil, which is something that maybe like, let's say, like a Trump might do, right? or something that I might do, which is just like because one is being hyper pragmatic and one is not so caring about certain types of feeling stuff. You would make these types of decisions, but then one way or the other you're gonna lose, right? Either you lose in the beginning when everyone calls you a soulless bastard, right? But then you win when it's like, oh, this was the right decision to do, but no one will give you credit anyways. Or you win and you look like a great magnanimous person. Yes, sanction the Russians, and now people are like, oh my God, gas is going up. Why did you sanction the Russians? What do you have to say about all this?
I think that there's a part of this being because we have a Democratic president. His thoughts are looking at the picture of what Putin is doing over there is not right. And I'm not gonna support that, and he's not getting my business. If we look at it from those set of lenses, we see a president who has followed his Democratic Party's mindset about issues that should be looked at more subjectively. In other words, if we maintain the relationship, we're helping our citizens and we're being effective in our numbers. We're stopping potential inflation and things like that. So I think that but then again, he could have done it, and we would have said, "Oh, can you imagine this guy? He's supporting what they're doing over there. He doesn't even care that they're killing innocent people." So
what would you have said if Biden said, "Hey, you know what? Look, I get it. These guys are doing something bad. Here are the options that we have on the table, and here's the effect that it'll have. Here are the pros and cons of it. Yes, we can say sanction him on the oil front, but we're not so sure. We have not ramped back our oil production to pre-pandemic levels. We don't know what's going to be. People are going to be hurting in the gas pump during the summer, okay?
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I don't think, and somebody would, this is still Biden talking right now, say, I don't think that this particular lever is what's going to cause him to stop in Ukraine. Again, we're going to do everything we need to do, okay? But adding this one thing, which all the potential for blowback on us, is present, I don't think we should do. What would you have said if Biden said that?
I would have said we shouldn't look at it from that perspective. Rather, we should continue our relationships. Let's go with where we know that, because we know that after the pandemic, we knew and everyone saw that traveling was going to pick up, spending was going to pick up, people wanted to go out, go to restaurants because they've been sitting at home for 18, almost 24 months. So I would have given those numbers and said, wait, there's going to be a surge, especially this is the first legitimate summer since December 2019 for a lot of families and all over the world, and especially in the United States. I would have said, let's keep our options open because we know supplies are ramping up slowly. So we're going to keep our relationship. We're going to keep everything flowing so that we can, like the Germans say, the Germans for the Germans. Well, the United States for the United States. I would have said, let's take the backlash as, oh, you're supporting what's going on, because when it's all said and done, if we look at it from our country's perspective, we're protecting our citizens, right?
Yes. And I believe, anyways, we can continue to go down this rabbit hole here on the energy front. Okay.
Right.
But there are other things we're going to be looking at here after we finish exploring why we're here. Again, number one, the pandemic. Pandemic caused the supply to shut down because, hey, when we see prices going up, what do we know? We say, hey, there must be a lot of demand and a little supply, like ding, 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 right? And pandemic came in, we shut things down on the supply front. And when we opened up, not only were people had all this pent up demand, we also give them all this cash, right? PPP loan, you don't have to pay your student debt back. Do
Stimulus.
This, do that. Stimulus money all over the place, right? Money printer go brrr, all that good stuff, right? And hence we are where we are. And we looked at that supply chain issue or the supply shock issue as one which is not a simple thing. It's not like, oh, well, just give it 2 more months, give it 3 more months. It's like, no, you've interrupted a very, shall we say, interconnected machine for which there is no headquarters. No one knows what's going on, and no one knows how long it's going to take for the ecosystem to reconnect with regards to what do people want, how much of this stuff do I need to make, what is the rest of my supply chain doing, can I get the raw materials, is the price of the raw materials going to completely spike because of some other thing downstream or in the marketplace that I no longer see now, right? And things of that nature.
It's kind of like the chip shortage. No one saw that coming. I mean, all of a sudden there's a chip shortage for cars, for electronics. And interestingly, for those of you in the music field, buying a mixer it was a mixer and a preamp was like looking for gold because the chips for making those things there was a shortage. So preamps became premium devices to purchase during the pandemic. So a lot of people, of course, didn't see that coming.
100%. And by the way, these are great teaching moments. Like for anyone, for example, let's say if you're like 20 years old right now, 18 or whatever, and you're seeing pandemic, inflation, possibly a recession that will happen. Maybe employment numbers will go down, so have to go down sufficiently for inflation to come down, and all these decisions that people are making and all this kind of stuff, people pulling out of equities. This is always a great school learning moment, right? You don't get too many of these types of cycles in your lifetime, right?
That's correct.
For some of us, it was 2008, right? 2008 was like, oh yeah, we remember that one.
Yep.
Okay. Everything shut down, no freaking work anywhere, people getting furloughed, all that kind of stuff. So, and it affects, generally speaking, your whole entire economic outlook. That's why you have a generation called like the Depression generation.
Yeah, the Great
way
Depression.
They act and the way they save money and the way they look at things economically is shaped by that, what they experienced, right? So getting this experience is actually quite invaluable. It's a valuable thing to be in a situation like this where you see these shifts of cyclical and circular things, which I just found what the difference is. Because sometimes these economists, they say circular and then they say cyclical. And I'm like, okay, I know this is the same thing, but one is a bigger circle than the other. That's what it turned out to be. Like, for example, I was talking about bigger circles such as demographic cycles, right? Demographic circles where it's like, okay, that takes like 50 years to play out. And then you have the business cycle, which is happening, every 6 months or something like that. So you have one big circle, you have other circles inside the other circles. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, let us continue. Don't forget to click that like button.
Yes.
This is not a political channel. I'm giving you my opinion. I think President Biden is a great president, just like all the other presidents we've had. These people are human beings. They do the best that they can do under the circumstances. No one's perfect, right? President Trump wasn't perfect. President Biden wasn't perfect. President Bush wasn't perfect. President Clinton wasn't perfect. No president has ever been perfect. They've all made some mistakes. So I'm not going to get on Biden for that. But that decision was made, right, to not import any oil from Russia when this whole Russia-Ukraine thing broke out. And that decision is affecting us right now. right? Because we haven't gotten ourselves back up to producing the level of oil production here in the United States that we were producing prior to the pandemic. That's one. And then when you don't import oil from probably one of the world's largest oil producers, which is Russia, you don't import any of their oil, then that's a double whammy. And that's the reason, in my opinion, here in the United States and around the world, why oil prices and gas and energy is so high. So in my opinion, guys, those are your three reasons why we have runaway inflation: the pandemic, increase in housing prices or housing cost, and then obviously the increase in oil and gasoline, energy, right? Those are your three main reasons. Drop me some comments down in the comment box, guys. And
Yeah, and he doesn't need to explain why the happenings in a particular commodity, such as oil, affects everything else, right? That is one you don't have to explain. And by the way, petroleum, beyond again just being the source of energy, beyond the energy aspect, it is also a massive commodity in terms of its presence in all kinds of goods, all kinds of household items, including your freaking Vaseline petroleum jelly, and all kinds of things that you would not think contain petroleum, right? But they do.
In the
Let me
past.
pause this. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Do that. But anyways, any thoughts there as he kind of wrapped up with regards to Biden and all that kind of stuff? By the way, there's
my only thoughts. I just thought he omitted Obama. He went back as far as Trump. He talked about Bush and Clinton. I'm like, bro, there was one right before Trump. But anyways, I think that he kind of touched on the housing market briefly, and we know that the housing market is one that, you know, for me being a homeowner, there was an incredible surge in realtors calling me saying, hey, your property is prime rib, I can help you sell your property. And I think I could count 5 of my friends, you know, send me texts and say, hey, I finally got a house, I'm doing a housewarming party. And my neighborhood just right across, when I moved in here in 2017, 2017, it was just a big dirt road and now it's a bunch of homes and they're expanding the streets. So the folks that have the money, or, you know, who've taken the money, are still paying the workers to build these homes. They're the ones winning, because whether the market freezes or not, house prices are demanding an average, at least in my neighborhood, an average of 650 or higher. So, and some of these homes, and it's not even going to the quality doesn't even match what it used to be. But I think that the home market is one that to watch for, because the next generation, I don't know how they're going to get homes. I mean, the requirements to get a home from a job perspective, from an income perspective, credit perspective, looking at the interest rates, quality of homes, so many things are going to affect that in the future.
Home, by the way, but let me hit up the super chat, and then we'll talk about this whole home thing. As a quote unquote need. Now, shelter you need, right? But the whole, you know, having your own picket fence thing, which you sign a mortgage with a bank for, like that whole arrangement. Who says who? Like, is written in the law somewhere in the Bible that, you know, that has to happen, right? But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and acknowledge the super chat. Thank you very much.
Don McKee, shout out.
Don McKee says, you know, does Richard understand that America has the capability to export oil? Imports are not needed. Yes, he understands that. He mentioned earlier that, however, we are not at our pre-pandemic capacity production-wise.
That's right.
And we may not be in the worst position in terms of there's some other countries whom are part of the whole let's sanction Russia deal, but don't have any other source. I was watching something on Germany talking about removing certain inhibitions that they had on nuclear power, for example, which is a whole different ball game, which I want to discuss at some point. We've touched on it before on this channel about nuclear power and why it is actually the cleanest technically in terms of emissions, right? You're not emitting anything. You're going to be left with this dirty thing afterwards, but that's not a big deal. Okay, there's a lot of space in the universe, by the way. And I'm not saying that trivially. I'm saying it because it's actually true, right? It's true. It's a lot of space in the universe. Worrying about a little uranium cake here and there and then remembering, oh, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Line, and all these. It's like, dude, it's like almost 100 years ago now. Like, come on, technology improves.
It
right?
does.
You can't keep so that, and I say that to say this: a lot of people are going to need to rethink their whole thoughts with regards to energy, right, and how they get it, and what's actually efficient and what actually works. Because in addition to the fact that Biden said, hey, we're not going to import from Russia, there's this whole net zero approach, meaning let us go, because Greta, what's her name again? Some Greta chick from Sweden, the little girl that comes and tells us how bad we are treating the environment, right? You remember her, right?
Lisa Simpson, you mean?
that is funny. That is funny. I remember her.
Yeah.
If it was Lisa, at least Lisa had some sense. That Greta woman or girl or whatever the hell she was. But because Greta tells us, we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go towards this net zero approach of reducing the carbon footprint, all this kind of stuff, and it's just like, okay, well, you're gonna feel the economic effects of perhaps a foolhardy pursuit. But we don't expect politicians to be, Greta Thunberg. Yeah, Greta Thunberg. She's some kind of Scandinavian lady. But we don't expect politicians, neither do we expect anyone to have the kind of foresight to be able to know exactly the right decisions. We don't expect politicians to make decisions other than those which are expedient for them,
of course,
and their politics, if you will.
Right.
And their handlers or their controllers or whatever it may be, the people whom are sponsoring them and paying for this whole deal. But anyways, thanks again for the super chat. Now, we're going to talk about how some other people are dealing with it. Because you know what? In addition to the various drawers of money, which we talked about, which is, hey, you're going to need to set up your system, your money system, at any given point in time, okay? But in times like this, it's more important. But at any given point in time, you need to set up your money system such that there is the revolving money, which, you got to pay water bill and light bill and maybe a mortgage or a rent or whatever, right? Let's call that revolving, right? You pay it every month. Generally, you want to keep that low. You have that there. Boom. Good. And then you want to have these layers of money that disappear. The deepest layer before, we talked about that future retirement, or I don't know, maybe it's a college fund. That deep future thing, you're trying to compound or whatever, maybe that money disappears, whatever percentage of it that is. And then you have all these other layers that are disappearing. And then you have some play money that you're going to take some risk with, right? And obviously also you have the top line. You mentioned regarding the top line that, hey, you believe in multiple streams of income, which is the only way to go, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And in other words, the top line being what's coming in, you have control of that as well. But so far we're talking about how you divvy things up down here with the different drawers of money. But you have a lot of control on the top line as well. And you got to make sure that is safe, that is healthy, okay? And then in times like this, you look at cash and you look at cash flow. And cash flow can also be income from a job. And if that job is secure, you want to hold on to that. Okay.
Yes.
That's going to be a good little lifeboat for you to sail through here with some certainty while you make some decisions about how to remaneuver those other drawers of money that we've been talking about.
That's
but
right.
also, one may also want to think about those who are less fortunate. For example, this might be time, if you're so inclined, to maybe help out, maybe donate to, because you may be thinking like, I want to donate some to maybe the Salvation Army, to this particular charity here, this food bank, whatever it may be. But how, who is it really helping, or what does it matter? In times like these, okay, is where it actually is quite helpful, right?
Right.
So, and to that end, we're going to talk about what's going on in Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka.
Okay?
Let's hear
it. Let's see here. Sri Lanka is quite broke, like the rest of us.
Sri Lanka's Prime Minister says his country is now bankrupt and that there's no immediate end to the current economic crisis. Sri Lankans are facing hardships on many fronts. Petrol supplies have dried up because foreign currency reserves to pay for fuel imports have run out. Prices have soared, with food inflation now running at about 57% annually. More than 2/3 of Sri Lankan households say they're eating less as a result. Schools and offices are currently closed to keep people off the streets. People are angry and frustrated, and they're blaming politicians for the crisis, especially President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his family, which dominate politics. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe informed Parliament of Sri Lanka's insolvency on Tuesday. He said the economic crisis would be around until at least the end of next year. He added that bailout talks with the IMF depended on finalising a debt restructuring plan with creditors in the coming weeks. Here's more of his remarks to lawmakers.
Now, before we go into the particulars of this and we continue to watch the video here, now the reason why all of this is related is because we talked about money, cash. By money I mean cash now. Cash being very valuable in these times, and everyone running to grab the cash. And when in any situation like this, you don't have to overthink it, right? Don't overthink it yet. Okay. You're Sri Lanka and you're in debt, right? And we're in an environment where cash is now king. In other words, everyone is like scrambling, selling stuff for cash. People are hoarding the cash. The dollar is getting stronger as a result. Okay. You're not in a good position when you're in debt in that situation, right?
Right. Because no one's spending.
No one is spending. The interest rates are, in other words, look, before we go down to the granular level, there's blood on the streets. You owe money, right? Now money is expensive. Money just got more expensive.
Right.
And it's not like you had it before. That's why you owe money. Okay. And it just got even more expensive on you, right? Because again, uncertainty, people want cash. Hence, the dollar, and again, the dollar is going up relative to your currency and all this stuff because of all these things we're saying. Hence, you're going to find yourself in trouble. You're going to find yourself in trouble with the IMF, in International Monetary Fund, having to renegotiate and reconstruct some of these deals which you made with regards to paying the money back. I don't know if you had any comments on that, because it just kind of struck me that, yes, it does make sense that all kinds of debtors of all kinds, whether you're a country or in other countries, or you're somebody that has credit cards, in a situation like this where cash becomes very valuable, debtors are by definition in a bad position because they're on the other side of cash. Like that's the opposite of cash. Exact opposite.
I mean, if I'm in this country, what would I advise them to do would be, let's find a way, whether it's is encouraging people to spend, maybe I would find a program or something that's going to make the you did say there's blood on the streets. Maybe perhaps let's clean the blood first, right? let's build the public's trust back, and maybe take a loan. I don't know. I mean, it's a tough thing to do because a place like Sri Lanka relies heavily on, maybe there's a word that work when you hire a country, when you hire workers overseas. What's that called again? Just flew my mind. Outsourcing. Maybe we can make our increase our outsourcing appeal. Maybe we could something. They're in a panic, and I'm curious to hear the rest of the video with how, exactly what is titled, how they plan to overcome their economic issues. But definitely trying to get people to spend a little bit more, putting some trust back in the public, and any of those strategies or plans to do that would be my approach.
Interesting. Let's play a little bit more, and then we can talk about. We can talk more about these general approaches to get oneself out of the situation that Sri Lanka finds itself in.
Our country has held talks with the IMF on many occasions before, but this time the situation is different from all those previous occasions. In the past, we have held discussions as a developing country, but now the situation is different. We are now participating in the negotiations as a bankrupt country. Therefore, we have to face a more difficult and complicated situation than previous negotiations.
Let's go now to Colombo and speak to journalist Marlon Arisinga. Welcome to DW News Asia. The government says Sri Lanka is...
I'm going to say something before they move on here.
Go ahead.
As a developing country, and then now we're bankrupt. That means to me that, okay, something between then, when you were talking to the bank about your developing nature and how you're going to use this money, which you're borrowing from them, right? To develop, right? I'm a developing country. There's a lot of demand here. Look at all this stuff. Look at all these resources. We have all that kind of stuff. Okay, give me money. And then somehow they gave you the money and now you're bankrupt. So that development story, something went wrong there.
Yeah.
And I want to just make a comment about that, generally speaking, that you see what you typically want to do as a country is to get out of commodities. For example, you don't want to be like Nigeria selling oil or like Russia, right? Oil is a commodity, right? In other words, it's nothing special. There's no value added. Oil is not a Sony headphone, Okay,
Right.
it's just
It's a
oil.
necessity.
It's just it's the same everywhere. It's oil is oil is
Or is
oil.
oil, right.
He's got it wherever you find it. You got it. When you are in commodities such as these raw materials or crops like corn and all these types of things. In other words, think of commodities, and then from commodities you have value added. You just keep on adding value to the commodity, right? You can take that corn and turn it into high fructose corn syrup that ends up in some kind of a candy bar somewhere. That's better to be in,
Right.
than to be
That
the
just-
guy that just does corn. Because as you know, a lot of these countries, they have cocoa or rubber or corn, cash crops. They send it to other countries to make the freaking
process
corn syrup, and then they buy the corn syrup from them. That's a perpetual
insane.
hellhole that you're in when you're in that
Right.
situation. I don't care whom you are. The idea is to get out of a commodity. You can talk about it from an individual perspective as well. A commodity is equivalent to just having arms, like labor. Like everyone's got it, right? I'll pay you for it. Okay, I'll pick you up from money, I'll pay for it, but it's nothing. There's no value added. These
That's
are not
right.
your
That's
special little branded or whatever. Like there's not. It's just an arm, dude.
There aren't 6 fingers or 36 hours in a day.
Exactly. So time, exchanging your time for money, exchanging your basic level skill is equivalent to being a country that only does commodity, right?
Right.
No value added. The idea is you want to get out of that. Until you get out of that situation, you're never anywhere good. So Japan, for example, all kinds of bad things happen with the Japanese economy, and all kinds of things may happen financially, but Japan is all about value added. It's all about those Hondas, great stuff, right? The Japanese are great for making compartments, by the way, in terms of like anything made in Japan. Apparently, like if you check the way it opens and the way it closes, it's always very nice, neat, and perfect. Like if a door slides in, it's like perfect. There's no gaps. Everything just
And
slides
it even
in
gives you
perfect.
the satisfying when it closes.
Yeah,
right?
like, oh yeah, that's perfect. So the idea is these guys are doing value added. It's like you taking your hands and now you're like, you know what? I'm going to become a master craftsman. So now my hands are no longer just a commodity.
Right.
My hands are
adding value.
and I have price control in the market. I can ask for something. So I'm saying all that to say this. Sri Lanka went to the IMF, said, we're developing, okay? Meaning, generally speaking, we're trying to get out of this whole, all I can do is hands, all I can do is potatoes, all I can do is oil crap, right? Into somewhere where I'm creating industry, creating value added, maybe talking about the, shall we say, tourism industry, which is another thing that you can do, and blah, blah, blah. Somehow that didn't happen is what I'm saying. And that the overall, to add to your point of, well, how do we make things better, of which you mentioned tourism, the general goal for any individual or any country is to get out of a commodity being the lowest basic, everybody else's is the same as yours type of exchange, right?
That's right.
Is now bankrupt. Why is it bankrupt, and how much worse can it get?
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we've hit rock bottom. But with every passing day, it feels like we are, sinking even further. So it's more of an economic, I guess, like an economic death spiral. How did we get here? That's been discussed extensively over the last few months. And, we have also become like a cautionary tale or like a horror story to other countries. In brief, the main causes are corruption, severe economic mismanagement, political incompetence and arrogance, and misguided policies, like the overnight chemical fertilizer ban last year. Which is why, in addition to all these crises, we also have a looming...
So it just seems to be blaming the government and corruption, typical stuff that we hear. What do you think about that? What first of all, just give me how does that affect you when someone comes in and says, bad policies, corruption, this, that, and the other? What do you think?
Well, the first thing is to identify the easiest one to get everyone to support you. You could say, well, we have bad government, bad leadership, because they always say it's a leadership issue. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you could see that what he's really trying to say is when that money was taken to say, hey, we're a developing country, maybe due to, loose policies and greedy politicians, maybe what the loan or the lending of money, what it was intended to do, didn't happen. And if you know anything in places like that, there's some guy who probably owns a house that can buy half the right side of where his house is, and if he feels like the backyard could buy the other half. So there's someone that's probably taking all the money. That's the easiest place to point to. But we can point to other things, just the nature of the country, the type of people, their mindset, their level of education, the fact that there's, a lot of the younger generation have migrated to other countries. So you can start digging a little bit deeper, and you can see that there is maybe perhaps the youngest and the oldest left. Because I think that gets overlooked in some economic structures, because the older folks are thinking, I got to find a way to survive, and the younger folks are how do I find a way to survive? But the presence of innovation and putting the younger generation in the front of developing the economy or their infrastructures to fertilize their minds, it may be missing in a country like Sri Lanka. I mean, what do you think?
These are very good points. You're talking about the population. You talked about
Yes.
the demographic spread of the population, the older people, the younger people. And you
Right.
talk about, well, is it possible that beyond something which we may just call corruption, which we can put on the moral side of things, is it
Correct.
possible that there's something about innovation or a mentality, let's just call it,
Right,
right? A
right.
mentality difference
Yes.
between generations that could change this.
Yes.
I'm skeptical on the mentality aspect.
Okay.
On the generally speaking, I think that human weaknesses, human frailty, or human debauchery and human sin is kind of evenly spread amongst everywhere. So
Different type of sins.
yeah, different types of sins, exactly. So whether you look at old people versus young people, men versus women, this
Yeah.
versus that, it's like, I don't care. Like, you guys are all sinning. Okay, just do different crap. All right. Or women, you can't beat people up. Doesn't mean you're not sinning. We know what
Right.
you're doing. You're out there with your mouth, right? As
Right.
the power of life and death.
Saying
as it
stuff.
says it in the book.
Good
Killing
book.
people out there with your tongue.
But he
So-
he does mention the fact. I mean, from a political standpoint, in a country like this, you can blame that. You could take that narrative and say, hey, we have some corrupt political leaders that have put us in this situation, and he's going somewhere with that.
Yeah, 100%. So what I do see, so it is true from a purely descriptive standpoint that yes, corrupt, yes, bad decisions, on and on. You know the story of the guy, as you mentioned, that has all the money. Okay.
Right.
Now, I'm skeptical about, from a systemic point of view, I'm skeptical about the human aspect. I think it's systemic.
Okay.
In other words, I think that a situation where the bad decision of two people can lead to the downfall of your country is a bad situation. I don't care whom is in charge or not. Like, I'm not going to blame those two people. I'm going to say, how do you create a system whereby two people could screw it up?
So it's a systematic issue, which
Exactly.
which essentially falls on people setting up those systems. But then what people? Is it a few of them?
You're correct, right? It's a quandary
Right.
where, and this is why revolutions happen. This is why people kill people and have to start clean slate, right?
Right.
All that kind
Press
of
the
stuff.
reset button.
This is why the reset button, the great reset, different, another topic for another day. But this is why these resets happen. But before I go on here, let's go ahead and acknowledge these super chats. Someone talking about Don McKee again with another $2, talking about recalling the perfection of Japanese toys back in the 1980s. And then Hakeem with the $5. Thank you very much. Talking about, yes, I can listen to both of you talk all day. Good job, gentlemen. So thank you for the super chats, and please go ahead. The rest of you, go ahead and leave your comments. $2, $1, $100, doesn't matter. No discrimination over here.
That's right.
Okay, so I would say it's systemic. Okay.
Okay.
Just on the level of analysis, not that people can't create the system, but just so that one doesn't just keep on repeating the same thing, expecting a different outcome. I would
That's
say
right.
that until you create a system whereby it is not dependent upon X, Y, and Z, or these, it doesn't have all these. Basically, it's a single point of failure thing I'm talking about here.
Can
In
you
other words,
argue that the effectiveness and the direction of the system is influenced by the mindsets of the people in charge? Would you agree?
100%, and that's why you typically would remove when you're when you're doing system stuff. You're not doing it for here and now. Okay, you're doing it for future, and you're not doing it for perfection of any particular arrangement of instances, or looking at, how about this situation, how about this situation? Like, I'm creating a system, right, that will last is robust and can create or can best approximate what our goals are.
Right.
And typically it takes, and that's why I mentioned the wars and the killing, or particularly interesting times and people in a particular historical epoch. It could be one individual that comes in, but he has to have the vision of creating a system, is my point. Like, it can't be, oh, I'm going to do it right. It's like, no. What do you mean you're going to do it right? You create systems, institutions, things that are blind, things such as constitutions with institutions, with delineated rules, whereby they have fail safes. That's all I'm getting at, right? Where it's
so it's not catering.
A situation where two people are, it's like, oh yeah, there was a bad decision made. It's like, no, in a system that works, that's more robust, typically speaking, you don't have a single point of failure. You have a multi-headed hydra, to use the overused analogy, right? Multi-headed hydra rather than this single-headed snake. And multi-headed hydra is also analogous to systems and institutions, where an individual comes through and is good for making changes, but institutions ensure that things last. The problem, but let me not go too much further. All I'm saying is systemic problem solved by creating institutions with robustness and long-lasting, being the guiding star, right? And these things tend to be decentralized, so that you don't have the single points of failure.
That's right.
So let's continue here and see how he elaborates upon the corruption that he's talking about.
Food prices to look forward, and currently, I'm experiencing power cut right now. So this is the state of things, or state of affairs right now in Sri Lanka.
You've touched on it a bit there, these stories of desperation and suffering, which is sort of veering into a humanitarian crisis. How is this situation affecting people?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Undeniably, it is a humanitarian crisis. There's a shortage of life-saving drugs and medical equipment. The majority of small businesses have completely closed down. Even well-established businesses, informal workers and daily wage earners are undergoing immense suffering, because of skyrocketing inflation. And as human rights activists have pointed out, in addition to a humanitarian crisis, this has also turned into a human rights crisis. Just a few hours ago, peaceful protesters were arrested, and I'm getting reports that even about 20 minutes back, protesters were tear gassed. Right. So, and just a few days ago, we had a footage of an army officer kicking a citizen at a fuel shed. And this man was not even a protester, he was just simply asking some questions. So and we see this kind of incidents over the last few, over the last few weeks, of police brutality and armed forces brutality. So it is a humanitarian crisis as well as a human rights crisis right now.
A human rights crisis too. People, of course, want a way out. The IMF and the World Bank, though, are hesitant to come to the rescue of Sri Lanka. Why is that?
Shout out to Don McKee again, dropping another generous super chat. Talking about, hey, if we're going to be talking about what's going wrong or what just happened with a particular system, that we cannot overlook the influence of diabolical outside forces per se. Right. And I would say that, yes, 100%, that is true. And that to invoke Aristotle talks about the proximal cause of something, right? Which means this particular straw, right, broke the camel's back, right? That's the proximal cause. The guy brought the pizza to the house. That's the proximal cause. But there are other causes, such as you wanted a pizza and you made it. Anyways. So the proximal cause, which would be like, let's say a particular country came in and pushed you and then you fell. Yes, 100%. I cannot ignore that in this instance, the proximal cause was a country pushing you and you fell. But I cannot ignore other kinds of causes, such as the fact that you only had 2 legs as a stool. Let's say, you need 3 legs as a stool or something. Or you're a one-legged man, if I want to use the man analogy, right?
So you couldn't withstand the push.
The fact that you could not withstand the push, I must comment on. But I will not. But for sure, you have to look at like, hey, or you can say, hey, this was an unfair push, or there was no way that they could withstand this. Like, nah, this is really, that kind of a thing. But I would say, look, I think, especially based on what this guy said and this typical corruption story that we know, and that, quote unquote, that it's like, hey, this is a one-legged man we're also looking at. Yes, somebody came and pushed you, right? But I don't think you could have withstood the push. But what do you have to say about the comment here?
Yeah, it is. It is. The thing is, human history has shown that there's oftentimes you have a certain type of person or party in power that have diabolical schemes or plans, or maybe came in with the right intention but saw the opportunity to be empowered and took it. Because we just talked earlier about the absence of proper systems to prevent things like this. Loose policies, the absence of constitutions or poor constitutions or poorly constructed constitutions. I do think that history has shown us that every once in a while, whether it's in a century, in a decade, or decades, we will get a president or a leader somewhere that takes advantage of, oh well, they don't have what's going on. Like, for example, what's going on in Cameroon. They've had the same president since 1979, or some folks say 1980, or some folks say 1981, but he's been in presidency for 4 decades. He's rewritten the Constitution to allow himself to be renominated, and the citizens are just sitting there, with their shoulders shrugged, and when someone decides to stand up and take the runs for the next president, he just buys them out. So we have to look at the fact that the human has shown historically that when the systems aren't solid, when the citizens aren't woke, if you will, diabolical schemes could become, the next thing to happen. And we're seeing that. We can argue that perhaps was going on in said country.
Shout out to Jedi Said, I believe. Jedi Said. Thank you very much. That's $7. Interesting topic. Great show, he says, and you get a round of applause for that. Yes, I think that you're right. So when you have the system set up to be taken advantage of, or when you have a system set up that a straw can come in and break it, for me, typically, which particular straw came in and broke it, which particular president came in.
That's not the real issue.
It's not the real issue. Someone was gonna do that, or this was gonna happen. What's that law? If something can go wrong, it will, right? That whatever.
Right. Murphy's law, something.
Murphy's law, yeah. So it's like, hence one has to look at the system, and it tends to be, and it sounds dull or boring, but it's institutions. Okay, and institutions meaning, take for example, you have a system in the United States which says, okay, because of this simple failure, single point of failure thing, I'm going to create within the federal government, and also represented also within the states, copy that. It's going to be this 3 branches of government, and none of them really has absolute power. You can say the executive has a lot of power, but that's because it's concentrated in one person, right? But they can't just do whatever, right? They need the Congress for the power of the purse. And then the court, independent judiciary, one of the most important things that when you don't have it in your country, it's hard for anything to get done, right? Because there has to be a mechanism that looks that has some ability to put people underneath the law, right? Because the tendency
like a driving force.
Yes, and America, okay, United States, whether you love it or hate it, okay, has one of the most independent judiciaries. Because when you want to compare, when you want to judge something, you often have to compare to what, right? You want to try out the Mexican judicial system. Okay, you want to get hemmed up in the Mexican jail and have to deal with that judicial system. Okay, we want to deal with it in Brazil or Argentina, what Portugal maybe. It's like, no, I think you'll take your chances here in the United States. Why? It's the institutions and the way in which they're constructed. And I just showed you, based on this 3 tripartite, if you will, government system here, it's designed to, again, avoid that single point of failure or single point of taking advantage of, right? Which, as you described, that one person will come through. Either things fail or things get taken advantage of, and you design it such that it's disaggregated. And the same, shall we say, principle informs the states versus federal stuff, which is independent entities. I don't want you to know where my head is, or I want things to be relatively autonomous. The ecosystem does the same thing. I'm going to have a whole bunch of individuals. They're going to be autonomous. They're going to make decisions. And over generations and generations, we'll see what works.
That's right.
Right? So decentralized systems. We talk about the decentralized system of the market before. No one knows what to make or how to make, but people making this. over time we'll see what works, right?
Right.
Obviously, the, shall we say, downside of this decentralization is you don't really know what's going. There's no one head. There's no visibility. Like as I was saying, the market, like we don't know, right? And for someone like in China, for example, would look at the United States, China being more centralized.
Right.
Would look at the United States as chaos, like always doing this and doing that, and there's always gridlock in the Senate, and this guy. It's like, but that chaos is great.
Organized chaos.
Yes, it's like it's there for a reason. You don't want people like, oh, nothing ever happens in the Congress. And it's like, yeah, I don't think you want things happening there.
No, let's leave that space alone.
I think you just want them to keep on arguing, and it's like, oh, they never move. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what you want. You don't want to move and stuff.
That's how we want
it. If you think it's correct. Even if you think it's correct. But anyways, let us continue here.
Well, the Prime Minister actually mentioned in Parliament yesterday that the first round of discussions with the IMF has been a success. And but the assistance depends on a debt restructuring program. Now, the IMF recently stressed that other challenges are needed to be addressed, like containing rising inflation, attending to the severe balance of payments pressures, and reducing the country's vulnerability to corruption. So, in my opinion, there is a correlation between the IMF and political stability. Dealing with corruption, having a proper plan, and assurance that the government will stick to the conditions of the IMF deal once it's agreed. So these are some of the challenges I think which we are facing when it comes to the agreement with IMF.
Lots of challenges that you've outlined there. People in Sri Lanka say this situation, why the country is in this situation, is the fault of the powerful and dominant Rajapaksa family. Why are they getting the blame?
Well, the Rajapaksa family has been often labeled as a family business. And if you go back to Gotabaya Rajapaksa's presidential campaign in 2019, a kind of like a highly mythicized figure was created. The political slogan was Vadakarana Ape Virua, which means the war hero that works. So the voters were very optimistic of a systems change. But when it was evident that the family just picked up where they left off in 2015, anger started building up, and which eventually developed into the current slogans, which is Go Home Gota and Go Home Rajapaksas. I think people now see that the decisions that were taken by the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, PM and Finance Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, and then Basil Rajapaksa, who was also Finance Minister for a short time, have led to the current crisis. So this is why the people are blaming the Rajapaksa.
There are some big regional players here, of course, that being India and China. What have they promised or what have they had to say about the crisis in Sri Lanka?
Well, officially, both China and India have been affirming their support for Sri Lanka, and they have helped through credit lines for fuel, donations of medicine, and dry rations and food in the past couple of months. And when it comes to India, this is in line with PM Modi's neighborhood first policy. And from India, there have been donations worth over 300 million Sri Lankan rupees that were given to Sri Lanka. And in addition, this is in addition to the USD 3.5 billion economic assistance that they have provided in tranches. So when it comes to China, China has also been helping, and recently, China even praised the Indian government for its ongoing support to Sri Lanka, and they also assured their commitment to help Sri Lanka.
That was journalist Marlon Arisinghe in Sri Lanka. We thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So what do you think about that corrupt family that they mentioned? Apparently the same family within different positions in the government, and they're claiming that their decisions, well, first of all, the slogans that they mentioned don't matter. These are political slogans or whatever, but that they're, it's the same business going on, and these people have been in power, and power corrupts, blah blah blah. What do you think about the general argument? Are you convinced that this family is guilty? Not that you've been given any real rational evidence. What do you think about what he said about them being guilty?
I listen. I think it always it's easier for us to put the blame on someone. There's a saying that it's easier to give an opinion than to think, because thinking is hard. So it's just a general opinion to find it's the Rockefeller that caused it, it's the Westfield that caused it, the rich families caused it. What I think it's going on here is no one really knows, but you've rightly put it, the absence of proper institutions, constitutions, systems that are designed to cater to, that are designed to avoid pitfalls rather, but to strengthen and push forward to the big agenda. So looking at the families, because maybe the families are doing well, but what if that family was just smart? What if they just made the right investments? What if they were just able to secure their cash? What if they were able to make the right investments when they had the opportunity? Because you and I know, if we were those families, we're saying, whew, glad we made this decision, right? Whatever that decision is, because ultimately it's a survival game, right? So I think that it's easy to point to the guy who's doing so well, that, oh, you took all the money. It's always goes back to the blame game.
Indeed.
Is threatening food production around the world and is predicted to push millions of people into poverty. One region in central India is seeing this right now. Farmers there are getting into terrible
cool.
debt.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching that time. It's about an hour and a half before we start landing the plane here. Food shortage, and rising cost of food, all right? And maybe we'll get into the food thing specifically next week, because the food shortage, which has something to do with supply chains and shutting down the economy there, and all these other types of things, they're all related. But we're going to focus in on food specifically because it's another it's a very important thing, right? Food, clothing, shelter, energy to create and mobilize these things. The inflation rate being 9.1%, right? Highest in 4 decades. People are feeling the pinch. What are people doing? People are having to make adjustments. People are we looked at all the way from extreme as Sri Lanka, where people are quote unquote eating less. That was an interesting way to put it.
Instead of 2 slices of bread, I'll cut 1 loaf in half.
It's like people are eating less. That's a nice way to describe starvation, right?
It wasn't. They weren't talking about conservation. It was just, I'm just gonna eat less. I'll have breakfast only. That was a good one. I thought that was funny too.
So, the changes that people need to make and how we got here. How long are we going to be here? Many people are seeming to say because that we're going to continue. Last time we had this conversation it was 8.5%. Now we're at 9.1%. We asked the people. Do people think it's going to continue to go up, right? And you're saying, hey, on the asset owning side, which by the way is where you want to be, generally speaking, when it comes to inflation, because
that's right.
When something is inflating, you want to be on the side. You want to be holding that thing whose price is going up, like that thing for which there's a lot of demand and not enough supply. Talk about the housing market and the lack of inventory. You want to be holding that plot of land with that house on it, because then you're like, oh yeah, no. And as long as things are denominated in dollar, boom, it's going up. Plus the dollar's actually strong right now. We just like it's like a perfect time for like just cash, right?
Yes.
Like you got cash. Cash is strong. There's a lot of demand for cash, and if you have an asset that is also inflating, great, excellent. Let's go ahead and you know, leaving that super chat. I believe that's another one. Right?
The kosher clinician.
Indeed.
The kosher clinician. Sorry. Shout out.
The kosher clinician. Is there a comment in that, or?
I think he just says blessings, brother Ike. Good topic.
Thank you very much. The kosher clinician. Okay, so many things that we covered here. Okay, but if we recap on the reasons why we're here, perhaps we can just riff on those as a way of mentioning other things, such as the changes that need to be made, the kinds of learnings that one can have in situations like this. And perhaps I could start by saying one thing, which is that they say that it's in recessions that millionaires are made. And it is true, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't mean that everyone is going to, obviously not.
Yes, yeah. There are going to be people falling victims of the recession.
Yeah, but generally speaking, it's like, hey, blood is in the streets. People are selling crap, okay? Things that you were eyeing before, okay? Assets, because that's the idea. When they say millionaires are made, is meaning, to just simplify the story, is where some guy was able to grab an asset that he didn't have before. In other words, it was transfer of wealth somehow. He was able to grab an asset, grab an opportunity, because an asset could be just like, let's say, a piece of land, a boat, right, a house, a factory, a business, whatever it may be. That it is in times of recession, okay, that these things switch hands. Okay?
That's right. That's right.
And then 5 years later, there's a new millionaire because he was able to grab that piece of asset, that thing he was looking at, that cash flowing, whatever it may be, apartment complex, house, business, machinery, whatever it may be, okay? some freaking new cryptocurrency in the DeFi space that's going to be the next whatever it may be. I don't know, right? This is when you grab it, because when things are booming, you know, you're
it
not
gets
grabbing
harder.
anything,
Yeah, because
no
when
one's selling anything to you.
demand's
right?
higher, so you know it becomes a struggle.
Exactly. So never forget that as well. And it's not about making millions. You can make thousands too, right? You can keep an eye out for certain aspects of the market. Let's say we just keep it to equities or something simple like that, where you're like, I'm going to try to track the bottom of this, or I'm going to try to dollar cost average into this particular aspect of the market. Dollar cost averaging just meaning you set it and forget it. You say every week I'm going to buy $10 worth of this thing, because I think we're generally in the bottom, and this thing has some fundamental value where I think that 5 years from now we're going to be way up from here, or however long it takes this cycle to play out. When we leave this cycle, I'm going to make a lot of money. Why? Because even though I don't time the bottom perfectly, the whole point of dollar cost averaging means you're not going to time the bottom perfectly, because you want to time the lowest price perfectly, so you just put all your money in there, right?
And get it.
Of course, yeah, that's what you want. That's what you want, but that's not going to happen, right? So you're like, okay, I have $5,000 to invest. I don't know when the bottom is going to be, but I know things are kind of low right now. I find a particular asset class, whatever it may be. Again, we're talking about taking advantage of times like this to get that asset so that you can reap the benefit. You look at your $5,000, divide it, let's say, into 50, right? Divide it into 10 months, let's say, and I'm gonna buy, whatever amount per month or whatever amount per week, and the price is going like this, that, or and I'm not gonna time the bottom perfectly, but I'm around the bottom. It may go down a little bit more, but who cares? Because in 5 years we're gonna be way up here, right? And it doesn't matter if I bought it when it was $55 versus $65. It's $120 now.
Right.
It's like, okay, it's like, I'm trying to perfect. 40 was the perfect bottom. Let's say the perfect bottom was 40. It was 40 for like 2 minutes one day, like that, but you bought at 50, 65, 45, 50 again, all these different weeks. And like, you're good, because again, as I'm saying, it's now 120. So that's the idea. Something even as simple as dollar cost averaging right now would be key. But I'm gonna say this, and then I'll give you the last word regarding the reasons why we're here. Supply shut down, as mentioned by Mr. Thane, during the COVID situation. Okay, supply shut down, and then when we opened things back up, we gave people cash as well. So demand went up, and unfortunately, it's demand for different types of things. Okay, and so it's hard now for supply to still catch up. Okay, it's still because people don't quite know what people want, that kind of stuff. So there's still, as a result, there's a lot of inflation. Okay,
that's right.
And but the job market is still cool. The Fed, which we didn't talk about, we didn't really talk much about monetary policy, but the Fed is on the path of raising these rates in order to slow down the inflation.
Yeah, that's right.
They're literally trying to beat down the economy that they revved up.
They rose up, yeah.
They revved it up, gave borrowers cash and all this stuff. Now they're trying to beat it back down, raising interest rates, doing all this kind of stuff, what they call quantitative tightening and all that kind of stuff. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of interesting things happen. And if you're as I said, if you're like 20 at this time, is a perfect time to like study, understand how things work, understand that things are not, take in the good habits that these types of bad times engender, if you will. But anyways, go ahead. Last word.
No, I think you nailed it, and I like the part that you said about a 20-year-old. This is a perfect opportunity to be a part of history, and because a lot of times, us growing up in our generation in our 20s, you would read things, you would read books and or hear stories that there was a Great Depression and there was all this stuff, and you sometimes wondered, how did they do it? What did they do? And this is an opportunity to take advantage of. As what you just said, this is a chance to acquire stuff that otherwise wouldn't be sold. There might be companies dropping out of businesses. This is a good time to get in, and that way you can sit down with your children or grandchildren, or even future people, and say, back in 2022, this happened. I acquired this. And my closing thoughts too. I want to say something that I used to tell some people. The pandemic was a perfect opportunity to learn a skill, was a perfect opportunity to learn something. So every time you see something going on in the economy, the question always says, how can I take advantage of this? Because we can sit down all day saying, this is the problem. Gas prices are high. Gas prices are high. maybe this is an opportunity to, charge more on something. This some say was an opportunity for gas stations to make money, but their gas companies are saying, no, we're not really making any money at all. We're just selling at the highest price. Like, we said earlier, we're just charging you because that's what they're charging us. But I think, as you mentioned, this is an opportunity for someone to take advantage of the recession or of the inflation rather, and find a way to come out of this saying, I came out on top, as opposed to, oh, here I am, I'm bankrupt. So those are my thoughts.
All right. Those are perfect thoughts there to end it with. Yeah, there's somebody shorting the oil market out there who's making, money longing it, and then maybe now they're going to short it because it's going to go down. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Okay, until next time.
Salute.
Peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or tumble, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.